Welcome back to Daybreak Extra. Now, across Nigeria, people are leaving cities like Lagos, Abuja, and Kano for nearby satellite towns, fueling a surge in affordable housing. But are these homes solving the housing crisis or just shifting it, bringing longer commutes, poor infrastructure, and rising costs? In this segment, we will take a look at the real impact of satellite town developments, explore what works and what doesn't, and discuss how policy and private innovation could make affordable housing truly sustainable. So joining us via Zoom to discuss about this is Jamil Abdulsalam Hajaj, a real estate expert and also an investor. Welcome to Daybreak, Jamil Hajaj. A real estate expert and a judge.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, from your experience, do you see satellite town affordable housing as a genuine solution to Nigeria's housing deficit, or is it mainly redistributing the problem to the periphery?
Do you see satellite town affordable housing as a genuine solution to Nigeria's housing deficit, or redistributing?
Obviously, when you're talking about housing deficit, that's really a lingering problem. And of course, the way the federal government and the state government are creating satellite towns, to create more urban expansion and create a so-called housing affordability or affordable houses. I would say that's really a genuine solution. However, I will tell you that when you create a satellite town and you fail to provide access to those satellite towns, talking about infrastructure, talking about transportation system, either BRT or rail system, talking about creating job opportunities around those satellite towns, I will tell you the aim of affordability, the term affordability, would be defeated. Because when you create, for example, for those that are working in within the city of Abuja, talking about the central business district, they are working there in any of the ministries, and you get to have them reside within the outskirts of Abuja, talking about now you have to now consider the transportation costs and so many more.
Okay, this year, 2025, we continue to see a mass exodus from the coast of Lagos, Abuja, and Kano. Now, beyond rising rents, what are the primary pull factors making satellite towns more attractive to middle-income earners today than they were even 2 years ago?
Well, going with the way both the federal government and the state government search affordability housing and all, and if you're talking about the pull factor, there are lots to look into. One, fatigue, and I want to take, for example, being we are in a national TV. Let's take Abuja, for instance. One, there is a fatigue, for people working in the central business district to commit themselves. There is high level of fatigue from the moment coming to work. Any other things, psychological ownership. That's also another pull factor. Considering the landlord-tenant relationship in Nigeria, where you rent an apartment or you rent a house and you're living, and in no time, because of probably some policies and laws that are not well protective enough, people are scared of renting an apartment, because at any point a landlord comes, just reject you. So for this reason, a lot of people are thinking on how they could own their houses. They could, by all means, it doesn't matter whether within the city or outside the city. and another thing is a lot of real estate developers are coming in, to invest and to create urban expansion, But when you look at this, it only happens mostly in the EFSA, the state government need to get involved in creating urban expansion, in working with real estate developers, whereby we can create more opportunities, we can create job opportunities, we can give people access to having ownership of these houses themselves.
Okay, Jamil, how current are government incentives, tax holidays, land grants, mortgage subsidies influencing developers? Focus on satellite towns, and are these incentives translating into real affordability for migrants? I mean, you just talked about developers, so how is it influencing their focus?
Translating into real.
The network is a little bit, there's a little bit hitched. So let me repeat the question. Hajaj. How are current government incentive, tax holidays, land grants, mortgage subsidies influencing developers' focus on satellite towns?
Yeah, I feel this is two sides of the same coin. You could say, yes, the government is providing incentive, especially when you look at the scheme, the Renewed Hope scheme, when you look at the Federal Mortgage Bank, when you look at the family homes, there are schemes that are supporting or facilitating developers to provide more like a mortgage for public and civil servants. However, sometimes we always talk about affordable housing, but these houses are not even affordable and cheap. For example, if you're buying a house as low as 10 million naira as a civil or public servant, take for example people living the civil servant working at the state level, you are going to buy a house using mortgage for 10 million naira. There is an equity contribution of around 30%. Take, for example, around 10%. 10% of 10 million naira is 1 million naira. How many early entry level of civil servant could afford to pay 1 million naira contribution? That's one. Secondly, when you're working, as I always say, when you're working in the city center and your house is located, you calculate the money you're spending in transportation, the time you're spending in transportation, and all of that. So you get to understand, if you put everything together, the energy you put in, the psychological stress, the money you spend, at the end of the day, the housing scheme wouldn't be considered to be affordable housing. So I feel the government has to create job opportunities around these satellite communities, whereby people don't have to transport themselves far to go to work. One. Two, we have to find a way to provide the housing scheme more affordable, more accessible for civil and public servant, because as it is now, people get to apply, and at the end of the day, for them to get access to having this money is lots of headache. So these are some of the challenges. So our society is two sides of the same coin. So the government has to look into it deeply and look at other variable and other factors that are granting this housing solution non-affordable.
Okay, many new developments in and satellite
Many
towns are marketed as affordable luxury. So now, as an investor, in an investor's viewpoint, how do you define affordable, considering that property prices in major urban centers are projected to rise by another 10 to 15% this year? Are you there? Okay. Should I repeat the question?
You're talking about affordable luxury?
Many new developments
Many new
in satellite
developments
towns are marketed as affordable luxury. Now, in an investor's viewpoint, how do you define affordable, considering that property prices in major urban centers are projected to rise by another 10 to 15% this year?
as affordable luxury. Now, in an investor's viewpoint, how do you define affordable, considering that property prices another 10 to 15% this year?
Honestly, in property development in Nigeria, I don't think there is anything to be considered as affordability. As I always say, once we are talking about affordability, it's all encompassing. You're talking about accessibility, you're talking about flexibility, you're talking about people having easy and seamless access to having ownership of properties. However, in Nigeria, that's not the case. Now, when you're talking about how developers get to provide all these houses, now you have to consider the inflation rate. Now, a developer, maybe whether in Abuja or in any other part of the country, you would have to invest huge of money.
Are you there? Seems the network is a little bit unkind. Is Abdulsalam Hajaj there? Okay.
100 millions or in billions for you.
Well, we're still on the discussion segment. We're talking about satellite towns, housing solutions amid urban migration with real estate expert
The discussion segment.
Let's go on a short break. We will be right back. Welcome back to Daybreak Extra. We're still in the discussion segment and we're still talking about satellite towns, housing solutions amid urban migration with real estate expert, Jamil Hajaj. Now we'll continue talking with him via phone call. Welcome back again, Jamil.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's clearer right now. Okay. All right, so moving on. Moving to a satellite town often trades lower rent for higher transport costs and poor infrastructure. Now, is the move truly saving Nigerians money, or are we just shifting the financial burden to fuel and vehicle maintenance? Like earlier in the Zoom call, you mentioned something like moving to a satellite town and spending more money on transportation.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, there are so many variables to the term affordability. You know, we can't look at affordability as buying cheap houses. So affordability doesn't mean cheap. You know, the government has to, one, provide accessibility to this satellite town, you know, whether BRT, whether train, and reduce the burden of cost of transportation for these people living or moving to the satellite town. That's one. Secondly, we have to provide infrastructure for these people for easy movement around these areas. Third, the government needs to work hand in hand with the developers and providing literally more like a free land to developers. Because, for example, as an investor, you have to part away with billions of naira for you to buy land that you're going to develop mass housing in any part of the country, be it in Abuja or any state level. You know, so now you invest billions of naira in buying land. You have to buy the building materials and consider the inflation as well that hits every part of the country or every item you're buying. So at the end of the day, when you get to build just 2 or 3 bedroom bungalow, for a public or civil servant, you end up selling for at least, even at state level, shouldn't go lower than 10 to 15 million. So how many civil servants can afford to buy a house at 10, 15 million, considering their salary? And remember, you're only taking 1/3, 1/3 of their salary to make a mortgage contribution. And they have to pay 10 to 30% equity contribution from their salary to key in. So I feel the term affordability in the Nigerian housing context, I don't think it exists unless when government work very closely at different level with the developers, with investors to provide the term affordability.
Okay, Jamil, we have seen satellite towns grow faster than the government's ability to provide roads and water in Nigeria. Should private developers be responsible for providing the primary infrastructure? And if so, how does that impact the final cost of the homeowner?
You see, that also brought us back to the term affordability. When the government allows the developer to take care of the primary infrastructure, remember, the developer has to bond that cost on the selling price. And the cost of infrastructure, especially talking about access road, drainages, water, electricity, these are basics. This contributes to either 25 to 30% of a building cost. And the affordability ratio would definitely hit higher. So the aim of affordability day by day is being defeated in this country. So I feel the solution always is the government should provide land to developers. The government should provide access, primary or basic infrastructure for developers, and work with developers to peg a price that this price should not go beyond this amount. And at the same time, the government should come up with some level of bonds and guarantee that is going to be easy accessible for developers. These are only ways where people could have affordable housing, and we breach in the housing deficit in this country. But going with this concept of allowing developers to provide infrastructure themselves is not really going to help, and is not going to facilitate affordability in houses in this country.
Okay, so for families deciding between staying in the congested city or moving to a satellite town, as an expert on real estate, what financial and lifestyle factors should they weigh to make an informed choice?
Okay, so the average Nigerian, always wants to have an ownership of a property. Always wants to own a house, devoid of the location, whether in the core city or in the satellite town. He just wants to own a house. But if you look at many other factors, you own a house in a satellite town. One, there is transportation congestion. For example, you're working in central business district, and your house is along, probably you're talking about Mararaba, or you're in J, or you're in Lube, and all of that. Now, the cost of transporting yourself to workplace, it's crazy. One. Secondly, the accessibility from the time and the fatigue. We're talking about the time you wake up in the morning. If you want to report to work at 8, and then you have to leave your house at 6 something, just to make sure you get to work. At the point you close from 5 o'clock, before you get back home, be around 8, 9. So there are a lot of variables that needs to be considered. So the government always need to step in, provide job opportunities around this satellite area, so that people could either work remotely or they could work very close to the satellite towns without transporting themselves to the urban areas.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So what policy adjustments or private sector initiatives could turn satellite town development from a temporary fix into a long-term scalable solution for Nigeria's urban migration challenge?
One, the government needs to understand that real estate is centerpiece in developing any country and any city. So the governments at different levels needs to identify or understand that, and they need to work hand in hand with developers in propelling development. Now, by so doing, there should be some level of incentives to these developers. In olden days, 10 years ago, I know there are facilities for developers from the Federal Mortgage Bank called EDL, Estate Developers Loan, which has been scrapped, which as a developer, you have access to billions of naira to develop, and you sell it to civil and public servants, and the repayment will be used to facilitate to repay this facility. This is not being given. Developer, usually to get access to funds, you have to go to a conventional bank. And going to conventional bank, you're collecting money with an interest rate of nothing less than 30%. You're using this money to develop. You have to consider the inflation rate, which is almost around 20 to 20 something percent. So remember, all of these things will be borne on the final product which you're going to sell to last consumers, which is going to be crazy in terms of pricing. So my candid advice to government at different level is the developers in real estate needs to be part of creating housing scheme. The government shouldn't just sit in the office and create housing scheme without the involvement of these developers. That is one. Secondly, government should provide free lands for these developers and provide primary infrastructure to create affordability. Now, with so doing, I feel the affordability in the housing is really going to be facilitated, and people could have a roof over their heads, and we're going to close the housing deficit in the country.
All right, let's talk about policy and private sector synergy. The Ministry of Housing recently, earlier in the mid-year, around March to June, emphasized public-private partnerships, PPPs, to deliver thousands of affordable units. In your experience, what is the biggest bottleneck that prevents these partnerships from scaling quickly?
Nepotism.
Okay.
I will tell you, the federal government is doing the PPP, but I would want to ask you a question. Which private developer did the federal government partner with? I don't know any, and I can't mention one that I know. I am focused right now in Kano, and I will tell you, here in Kano, you can mention 1, 2 developers without mentioning my company. We're one of the leading real estate companies here in Kano. But I know nothing about the PPP. We've tried, we've applied the renewed hope through all access, but nobody is responding, nobody is saying anything. So the scheme, I will tell you, is dead on arrival. The government is building houses probably directly or using an insider company that they provide the scheme to, the PPP to. But at the end of the day, the government will keep building houses that are going to be empty. And this is what I always say. When governments get involved in building houses, these houses will end up not being purchased and they end up being empty. If we really want to propel the real estate market, the private investor needs to get involved. They need to be the drivers in the development, and that is the only way we can propel this. But this scheme, the PPP scheme currently going on by the federal government, I am telling you, I don't know which companies they're working with, but I will tell you for free, I don't know any company, and we are not involved, and we've tried our best to get involved, and we don't even know how to get there.
Judge, now, based on this concerns you just said, what is the single most important policy change needed to ensure satellite towns become thriving communities rather than glorified slums in the next decade? If you're to advise the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development today.
Well, the ideal thing is because if we're talking about urban expansion, we're not just talking about Abuja. We're talking about all the 36 states across board. The state government, the federal government, all need to create expansion in terms of urban cities. Go outskirts of the urban areas, create job opportunities, create factories where incentive for factories to move in. Developers will now go in there, create houses for the factory workers, create houses for people working in that location. Now, this is one incentive that the federal government needs to bring so that the developers could drive. Secondly, land should be provided to developers for literally not free, but at a discounted amount. Third, federal government needs to control inflation because the rate of inflation, I will tell you, in the last 2 years, we're buying a bag of cement at around 3,800. Today, a bag of cement is around 10,000. We're buying iron rod reinforcement for around 320,000 per ton. Today, you're buying it at over $1 million. But at the end of the day, as an investor, any which ways you have to develop. But the last consumer would find it very difficult to own a house because of the cost. So I feel the federal government needs to be intentional, just like other developed countries. You go to Egypt. Egypt is working hand in hand with investors. They're expanding. There is New Cairo, there is Medinati, they're creating now New Cairo, a new capital city rather. You go to Saudi Arabia, they're expanding, they're bringing investors all over. Why is Nigeria not doing that? Before you get a land, you have to pay. You have to know someone in the government to do that. And that is why the aim is always defeated. And the government can never, ever build houses for civil and public service. They need to work hand in hand with developers, and developers could drive this.
All right, thank you very much, Jamil Hajaj, for coming to Daybreak this morning. Thank you for your insight, your profound insight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, this brings us to the end of the discussion segment. Let's go on a short break, and when we return, we'll bring you the virus stories on social media, especially in the entertainment scene. Don't stay with us.